Navigating America's issues. Well, the election's over, but there's still issues. Would you agree? So here's the question. Should Christians support the Second Amendment?
Yes.
And the reason we're going to approach this is, even though the election's over, this is a hot topic that Christians deal with. Is, should Christians own guns? Should they, it kind of opens a broader question of, what about the revolution? What about pushing back against authorities? What about, the founding of the country? And so we're going to spend a little bit of time just talking about this. And my goal is that, we'll do this topic. We might have another topic or two we'll go through. They will not obviously be election related, but there'll be something that are kind of dealt with as what's going on in our country and how should Christians respond to it. But just because we have a change in power to some degree doesn't mean that we can just forget and not educate ourselves on some of these topics. So I'm going to try to still hit a few things until we kind of feel like we've come to the end of this. They just won't necessarily be ones that are pertinent to the election anymore, since the election's over. So should Christians support the Second Amendment? I heard a resounding, yes, they should. And I would agree with you. But why? The question is not should they, it's why should they? Because there's a lot of Christians that I even know that would say, they're for gun control. They don't think it's appropriate for Christians to have guns. And it's usually on a faith-based system. God's my defender. God's the one who protects my family. So if I take and buy a weapon to do it myself, somehow it's a violation of faith. And that's a question that needs to be answered. If someone comes to you with that argument, how are you going to respond? So we're going to look at some examples from Scripture, but also just look at it kind of in a broader context of what's the idea behind this, and where does things kind of get hung up, and we're just going to kind of tackle it a little bit. We'll see how far we make it. It might take us a couple weeks to get it done. So there are obviously some arguments against the Second Amendment. This is the one that I would say Christians make a lot of times is God's our defender and our avenger, and he's the one who protects. I agree with that. I don't want to say I don't agree with that thought process. But sometimes it's by what means. And also, sometimes we have to still do things. What responsibility do we have that God has put on us in the meantime to do things? For example, we've been going through government, right? We've been talking about the government. Could God just say, I don't really need a government official. I don't need a king. I don't need that. I will just enforce what's good and punish what's evil. Could he do it himself? 100%. He doesn't always do that, does he? In fact, his design for humanity was, I will put someone in power, allow this individual or this nation to have a government, and their job is to be my sword. They are my servant while I am here. Not because I'm far away, but because they're going to participate in my ruling to some degree. We're to submit to the government, not rebel against them. So this is a direct shot at the revolution. That was obviously fought with arms. The men took up arms and they fought against the British. And were they justified in doing that? Should they have not done that? So we'll kind of tackle that one a little bit as we go. Revolution was unjust despite its resulting benefits, right? And so here's a couple arguments for it. God is the ultimate avenger and defender, but we are responsible for protecting ourselves, families, and property. So Christians will come right back and say, yes, God is the ultimate, but I am in charge of making sure I'm diligent to steward the things he's given me, including my own life and the lives of those and my property. Self-defense is a biblical concept. Is it? It is. But do we know why? A citizenry that is well-armed keeps the government in check. Okay, this was the founders' idea, was that if we give all of the weapons away and we have nothing and they have everything, there's nothing to stop them from taking whatever they want. And so whether they intended to use it, they didn't want to, but they knew by just having it, it was a deterrent. It was someone saying, well, if I really want to take this, I have to be prepared to do it with my own life. And the founders understood that, and so there was this kind of peace through strength idea that existed.
That's called communism.
Yeah, when you just hand over all your weapons, it can end really badly, right? So let's talk about this, self-defense. What's the biblical view of self-defense? Is it okay to defend yourself? Is it not? Because there's a debate in Christianity over this, 100%. And I'll show you where. This is usually where it hinges on this verse. He says, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the evildoer. But whoever strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. And the one who wants to go to court with you and take your tunic, let him have your outer garment also. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. So there's a lot of pieces to this, but the biggest one is, whoever strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. This is where I would say uninformed Christians hinge their anti-gun arguments, okay, is on this one, which is pacifism. Let people do what they need to do and you don't fight back. That's kind of where they go with this. Is that what this verse is saying? No, it's not. It's not what this is saying. Jesus is not talking about self-defense in this set of verses. What's he talking about? And he actually isn't even talking about this. You know, whoever strikes you, we say, oh, strike. So when we first read that, we think, okay, a guy walks up, punches you. Someone walks up with a weapon and uses it against you. That's not what he's talking about. In fact, that's not even the word. That's not even the proper Greek word. This is the Greek word that he uses, but it actually is something that means a backhand slap that was only intended to insult somebody. This is not a word you would use for bodily harm intending to hurt someone. This is a word that's used specifically for insult. So when Jesus says, if someone strikes you, what does he say we should do with that? Insult them back? Strike them back? No. Let them insult you again. See where he's at? That's a little different when we put it in the proper context. The slap was not intended to do bodily harm or commit murder. That's not the word that's being used here. It's intended to insult you, make you look foolish, embarrassed. So should one resist evil in any manner? Is there a line? Some evil you resist, some don't. Okay, is it evil to insult somebody? Is it wrong to insult somebody? Like Jesus is saying, yeah, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't insult somebody. And he says, don't resist that. But does that apply across the board to every kind of evil?
No. It says resist the devil.
Yeah, resist the devil. You've got to resist him, right? So there is a time where God says you should resist. And there are times where he says you shouldn't resist. And it's not always on the same things, right? Here's 2 Corinthians. Here's what Paul did. Okay, tell me if he's resisting here. The authorities. In Damascus, the governor under King Artus was guarding the city of Damascenes in order to take me into custody. And I was lowered through a window through the wall in a rope basket, and I escaped his hands. Why? Why didn't Paul take the position Christians take, which is just do nothing, God will defend and avenge you? Did Paul believe that? Did Paul believe that God was his defender, protector, and avenger? You can bet he did. So then why is he escaping, is the question.
Resistance of evil.
Because it seems like he's resisting evil, right? Is he justified to do this? So how do these two things go together? Where you can trust God and yet at the same time you can say, if I have an opportunity to protect myself, keep myself safe, keep my family safe, whatever it may be, I'm taking it. Without disregarding your faith in God. So could we make the argument then that God has provided the means in this country to defend yourself through a gun? Yes. Because some would say, no way God would do that. He provides other means for people to escape death, defense, protect themselves, get away. Paul, it didn't always go that way for Paul. Sometimes he got arrested, he couldn't escape, and what happened? He got lashed. All the apostles, ultimately except John, ultimately died martyrs. They weren't fighting back and dying, they were dying crucified, captured, stabbed, boiled, ripped apart, you name it. Everything bad you could have happen. Is Paul resisting the authorities? Well, you could say kind of. He's not submitting to the king here, who's coming to get him. On what grounds is Paul resisting?
The authority of God.
This is the guy who wrote Romans 13. Submit to the authorities. And here he is saying, I'm getting away from them. You know? And so the basis is that they're after him for unfair means, he must think. That he didn't do anything wrong. And if he has an opportunity to preserve his life because there's nefarious activity amongst the authorities to try and shut him down. And why are they trying to shut him down? Because he's telling the truth and he's preaching the gospel. And he says, my allegiance is to that over anything else. If evil is being propagated against somebody, do we have a greater responsibility to protect the innocent? When even it's coming from higher authorities? Yeah. That's a question. And it's debated. It was debated during the Revolution, actually. You know, there was preachers in Britain and there was preachers in America that were on both sides of this. I'm going to show you here in just a second. Because it was not easy for them to come to this place where they had to decide, do I listen to the government or do I listen to God? Let's go on. Should Paul be taking such an action to prevent his own harm? I would say yeah. He should. But some would say, well, he should just trust God that he's going to jump down, swoop in, stop him, and maybe he would have. Here's Matthew 5:42. This is the key that kind of contexts the other turn your cheek. He says, give to the one who asks you, do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Is that applicable in all places at all times with all people? If someone got the understanding that they could just borrow from you, you'd never say no because you're trying to stick to the letter of the text here in Matthew, you're going to be broke. Is God saying we should be broke? You know, if you really wanted to get fancy with this, you'd say, well, then fine, I'll just go to the guy who's using it against me and I'll just tell him I need to borrow money and then we'll just go back and forth forever, right? You could really take this and go crazy with it. And that's because that's not what it's talking about. It doesn't say go broke doing it. But what's he talking about? What's the spirit of the law? What's the spirit of the word here? Someone insults you, don't insult him back. Yeah. Someone takes advantage of you, doesn't mean lose everything. It means don't repay evil for evil, right? Be generous, be loving, be able to go to sleep at night and say, I actually went the extra step. He said go a mile, I went 2. He took this, I gave him my cloak as well. That was the idea, is to be able to live a life of holiness and generosity before man so you can reflect God's goodness. But it was not a command to go broke or to allow yourself to be killed. You know, there's a line between generosity and enablement, isn't there? Yeah. And we have to have wisdom to know when to say, no more, no more. That's over, right? And when someone does hurt you or try to harm you in this manner, not bodily harm, you're dead, your family's mine, I'm taking your property, but in somewhat of a less harmful manner, don't respond with evil. Don't do it. You can have an impact on somebody when you do it this way. So obviously it's not applicable in all indications. So here's another example. This is the self-defense verse. That's what I'm going to call it, okay? Because this is really where we get our biblical justification for self-defense in the New Testament. And he said to them, when I sent you out without a money bag and a traveler's bag and sandals, you did not lack anything, did you? And they said, nothing. And he said to them, but now the one who has a money bag must take it and likewise a traveler's bag. And the one who does not have a sword must sell his cloak and buy one. Okay? For I tell you that that is written must be fulfilled in me. And he was counted with the criminals. For indeed, what is written about me is being fulfilled. So they said, Lord, behold, here are 2 swords. And he said to them, it is adequate. So they're at the end of the ministry here. Jesus is about to be crucified. And he's having some final conversations with the disciples. And he tells them, I know I told you guys not to take anything with you. When it was our ministry, we were just going out. We were staying in people's houses. We just went. But he says, things are about to change. I'm about to be killed. Things are going to ramp up a notch because the hostility toward me and towards you is going through the roof now. And what does he tell them to do?
Defend yourselves.
Get the means to be able to defend yourself. So is Jesus against self-defense?
Not at all.
When he's literally telling the guys, at the point of he's getting crucified, I want you guys to be able to protect yourselves when I'm gone. You're going to need the means to do it. In fact, not only just go find one, but if you've got a money bag, you've got to take it and you need to go use it to buy something. He's actually taking the resources and saying, invest them in something to defend yourself now.
So God's
What is he saying? I want you to have a sword so you can continue to do the work that I've asked you to do. And when evil presents itself, you've got a couple means. There's a couple reasons I want you to have this sword. And we're going to look at them in just a second. But there's purpose behind that. Not to put them in an offensive, get your sword and get ready to go to war. It was get something so that you can deter and stand against evil, right, in the midst of this. So Jesus knew after his arrest or his crucifixion, the disciples would be in danger of harm. Of course, things are ramped up. The leader's gone. Guess what? We're going to take out all of them. That's why Paul's hiding and they're escaping and they're doing these types of things. They would need to be able to protect themselves. Peter appears to have carried a sword consistently. We're not really told that he had it with him all the time, but it seems like he was ready to go if needs be. Okay? Is that one of the two? I have no idea. Maybe there was 3 swords in the group, And Jesus never actually tells him to throw it away. When he pulls it out in the wrong manner and he slices that guy's ear off, Jesus actually says, put it back in its place.
That's true.
Don't throw it away. He doesn't say don't throw it away. He says put it back where it belongs. Isn't that interesting? In fact, here it is. And behold, one of these with Jesus extended his hand and drew his sword. Like Matthew doesn't want to tell us it's Peter. Isn't that kind of funny? And striking the slave of the high priest, he cut off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, put your sword back into its place. This is not an offensive time. We're not going offense here. We're not preventing my cat. You guys know this is what I was here for. Should know it. Peter obviously says, no, you're not taking him. This is not the time for that. Doesn't mean that there's never a time for that. But this is not the time for that. That's part of wisdom. That's part of knowing what God's will is with these things. Knowing when and how to use these things. Here's Luke 22:36. And the one who does not have a sword must sell his cloak and buy one. So there it is. Again, I want you to have this. And why would Jesus say this? See, Jesus was not naive to the threat of evil. He has the total authority to destroy evil, total power to shut it down, and yet he hasn't done that yet. Purposes are his. But we still have to exist in that world, in that realm where evil thrives. And God knows that you have to stand against it. And there has to be deterrence, things that stop it. The disciples would need a deterrent even if they never used it. We really don't have, besides Peter's instance here, I can't really find an instance where one of these guys took the 2 swords, at least it's not recorded, and pulled this thing out and went wild. We don't really have that recorded in text. Maybe they never had to use them. Maybe they did and it's not recorded. We don't know. We don't know. But it was, if you saw a guy walking down the street and he had that sword and you thought you were going to rob him, you're going to think twice about it. And that in itself is the concept that's most important when it comes to this idea of bearing arms or self-defense, is that you get in the mind of the would-be individual and they have to be pretty set with their life on the line that if I come after you or your stuff or your family or your whatever, I better be prepared that I could not walk away from this. It could cost me my life. I have to want it that bad. And so people think about that twice, don't they? They stop and say, am I sure I want to do this? Here's the Nehemiah verse we were just talking about. It happened when our enemies heard that their plan was known to us. Remember, Nehemiah is going to rebuild the walls. He gets the okay to go do it. God had frustrated it, and we all returned to the wall, each to his work. From that day, half of my servants were working on craftsmanship, half were holding spears, small shields, bows, and breastplates. The commanders were behind the whole house of Judah. The ones who were building the wall and the ones who carried the materials were carrying in one hand while doing the task, and with the other hand were grasping a weapon. Each of the builders had his sword tied to his side while building. Why? Why not just trust God? God's already ordained you to go and build the walls. You already know that this is the calling. Nehemiah had it. Who cares? Don't bring the weapons. Just put them down. Instead, he says, no. We've got these evil groups out there that don't want this to happen. Yeah. And so what do? We got to protect ourselves. We have to deter their activity by saying, if you come against us, we're going to fight you. Yeah. And it kept them back. But as soon as they said, hey, look at Nehemiah and all these guys, none of them are armed. They're just sheep to the slaughter.
Couldn't
It's going to empower them to say, we can take power over them. We can control them. We can take them out. Just having those weapons there. There's no indication they had to use them. But just having them there did what? It's a deterrent. It's a deterrent. And so I wonder how much of Jesus saying, I want you guys to just have a sword on your hip, was more of, I really don't want you to use it. Of course not. However, just having it, he knew what that would do psychologically to the people who would consider coming after them. And it would stop that. And they would have the ability to go. Be free. Reason citizens carried swords. This was ancient world. Equalizers. Not a great one if you think about it, because you could have a really small person or a lady that's got this sword, and a big guy could come along and take the sword away and use it against her. But in their world, this was what you had. So if a man had a sword and there was a bigger guy, at least he didn't have a sword. At least you could somewhat have kind of an equalizer, right? Maybe not have been the best one, but it worked for their day. Local protection. Could the Romans be everywhere? Could the Roman guards be everywhere in the whole empire? No, they couldn't. And so there were times where people had a local thing happen, something evil took place, a robbery or whatever, and they would defend themselves. Romans don't need to be involved now because it's been taken care of. So a lot of times it was also just so that I can be alive and not have to call Rome, be like, when are you guys going to be here? Someone's breaking into my house. Yeah. They didn't have to do that. They could defend themselves, right? They couldn't be called at every situation. Protection for the weak. What if you have somebody who is disabled, someone who's elderly, someone who can't defend themselves, and here comes evil at the door and is ready to take advantage of them in a very evil manner? Would this help with that? Protect the weak. I don't want to hurt this person, but in order to save this person, I will. A sword-equipped individual so they could protect someone able to defend themselves from harm. Here's what Isaiah says in Isaiah 1. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, rescue the oppressed. What if you have to use a sword? Defend the orphan. What do you mean? Like just verbally? Or what if they're coming under physical attack? Plead for the widow. Let's talk about this one. This is really not a comparison. Guns are better equalizers, aren't they? In fact, even the smallest defender can neutralize the largest attacker. David and Goliath style. Yep. Makes sense. That was kind of your first gun. It was the sling. You just had to be really good with it, right? But now you have an even better situation for protection, for self-protection. For women, for smaller people, against larger people, stronger people. It would be reasonable to conclude that if Jesus allowed defense via swords, other means would be acceptable as well. Sword was the weapon of the day, but does that mean that Jesus said, no, that's it, you can't use anything else? He didn't say that, but he seems to say it's okay to defend yourself with a weapon. Weapons would change over time. Maybe a guy was sleeping with a bow and arrow. That might be kind of hard to defend yourself, You got to try to get that thing out there, May not work real well. The sword was quick. You got it ready to go. So that was probably the best means to defend yourself. We have something in our society now that is a better means to defend yourself. There's a reason they don't fight with swords and shields anymore, because an army with guns comes in and it's over, right? So why did the founders enshrine this right to bear arms? Because it really just comes down to this idea of self-defense. Not so we can go offensive so much. Not so we can go out and just be, tyrannical rulers and dictators and destroy everybody. It was so that we could keep the powers in check, right? Here's what it says. I have this in my basement on a plaque that hangs on my basement wall. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is what they thought about it. This is what they said. Intended to provide local protection of the 13 colonies by the men within them. British are over there. Here we are. And now they're not even our friends. They're against us. How do we protect ourselves? What means to defense do we have against evil? Intended to deter any government that would assert power by force over the citizens. That's why it's important today. Because yes, the military has guns and they have planes and and they have all these things, but there's also 325 million Americans, and there's more guns than that, if I remember right, in the country. And so you have to stop and say, if we really want to take out and control the American people, we have to disarm them. And if we can't disarm them, we can't control them. And so the founders knew this was the great deterrent to tyranny from taking over, knowing that there was a threat that they'd have to pay for it with their life. As sad as it is that we have to live in that, that's just the reality of an evil world. You can't ignore it. Some people want to say, I'll just ignore it. Pacifism. The evil does not ignore those things. They love the pacifist. They love it. The amendment is not a guns for hunting law. I say that because a lot of people say, they get into media and they say, well, this is just so we can hunt. No, it's not. This is so we can defend ourselves against a tyrannical government, against evil. Hunting is a great thing we can do with guns, but that's not why the Second Amendment was there. It has nothing to do with hunting. Were the founders disobedient to God for the revolution against Britain? It's a big question. So here's some context for it. The founders believed they were allowed to fight on the basis of self-defense. Self-defense was a huge piece of that argument because they're saying, we want to live here. Remember, they had made their list of things to the British and said, here's what the king needs to correct because they believed he was acting evil in oppression that was devastating to them. And they said, we've got our list of demands and we're going to send it to him. And how did he take that? He didn't take it well, did he?
He said no.
And so they tried, you have to say they tried to get those things taken care of. If the king would have said, I'll go ahead and take care of these things and we'll get this on track, would they have left? Doesn't seem to be the case because they would have got their demands met. They would have said, the tyranny has stopped, we've pressed them back, we have the freedoms we need. But there was a lot of debate on this issue within the church. What should we do against the British? So there was an English preacher, this guy's over in England, John Wesley. You've ever heard of him? He encouraged those considering revolution to just submit to the king and to trust God with the result.
Yeah, because he was English.
He was English. And that's the reason I put he was an English preacher, because you're going to see how the American preacher is actually different. The colonist preacher was a little different. So American preachers, here's a couple of them, John Witherspoon, Jonathan Mayhew, they preached a just revolution could be carried out against tyranny rather than the institution of government itself. And said, listen, we know what Romans 13 says. This was kind of their argument. We know what it says. And we're not saying we are against or not going to submit to government as instituted by God. The institution of government, the idea, the creation of this thing called government. We're not rebelling against that. But tyrannical kings, they're different. That was how they justified it. In fact, here's what Jonathan Mayhew said, 1750. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. This was a preacher telling the colonists what the scripture says. So you can see his interpretation of Romans 13, and there's a lot of debate on this. Was he wrong in his interpretation? Did he broaden it to justify this revolution? What was his reason? He was trying to find ways to say, yeah, we're right in what we're doing. And he's looking through scripture to try to figure it out. Now, we, sitting here many years later, can look back and say, well, it seems to have worked out. America prospered. God didn't just be like, hey, unjust revolution, they're toast. It's prospered. It's become maybe the most prosperous country ever to exist. It's done more good for the world than maybe any other country that's ever existed. You have to stop and say, which side was God on? Whose interpretation did God go with? Was it neither one? I don't know. These are questions to be asked. You ever heard of this thing? British soldiers fired on unarmed colonists. This was after they had said, here's the issues that we want addressed. Sent it to England. They obviously didn't receive it. And then they have the Boston Massacre. The colonists took the position of self-defense before even ever firing back on the British. In fact, they said, don't fire unless fired upon. What's the attitude? We don't want to fight. But if you come after us, we'll fight you. That was kind of their idea. We want to conduct this and do this peacefully. But if you're not going to meet our requests and we can't negotiate and get these things worked out, and then you decide to just fire on unarmed people, in their mind that was enough to say, we're not putting our lives in the hands of this government. They'll just kill the innocent.
Yeah.
And so we're going to fight. So when you read Romans 13, let every person be subject to the governing authorities. Now, this is where it gets wild. Let every person. This is where the English preachers would come in and say, see, everyone, including you guys in the colonies. And the colonists said, yeah, we are trying to submit and subject ourselves to the governing authorities, but this guy's no governing authority because he's tyrannical. We're not against the institution, we're against this king. That happened a lot in the Old Testament too, if you think about it. A lot of instances where the people, we read about this a few weeks ago. Guy's made king, he shows up in the local town, and what do? They rip him out of the thing and they kill him, right? We're not putting up with that. The citizenry said no, right? The founders believed under moral biblical support for self-defense, they were morally justified in their revolution. We just want to be free. We believe it's an alienable right that God has given us. We should have it. And these people are trying to take it away from us. And we're asking them to stop, but they're coming at us now with force. And we're not going to stand for it. So we'll fight them. And we have to defeat them, or we will be slaves. This is their whole basis. They believe firmly in the notion that one's freedom must be protected and must be done so by the deterrence of arms. I don't think these guys wanted to do this. They wanted to live peacefully and they wanted to have freedom. But when the evil came against them and tried to take away what they believed was a fundamental right from God, they said, we will not have it. And that's how they justified it. That's how they interpreted the scriptures to get there. So should Christians own guns for self-defense? I think so. I think there's absolutely a biblical basis for self-defense. Because we do have responsibilities that God has given to us to stand against evil. And sometimes, in certain circumstances, there's nothing you can do but do it by force. Right? Someone comes into my house for my kids or my wife. What's my responsibility as a husband, as a dad?
Shoot first, ask questions.
Shoot first, ask questions later. Use discernment. But ultimately, the guiding principle behind any decision I make has to be, how do I protect the innocent that are under my care? And I'm going to try to get us to safety. But what if you can't? What if you can't? You're going to have to defend yourself. And if that circumstance presents itself, I would rather be prepared for it than be going, oh, I wasn't prepared for this.